Marvelous. So, welcome to this next installation of our Stepping Stones presentation series, where we are talking with faculty at Georgia State University in psychology regarding their paths and their careers and their experiences. So, welcome to Lisa Armistead. And Lisa, I wanted to ask you just to introduce yourself and say a little bit about what your area of research is.
Sure. So, as Dr. Turner said, I'm Lisa Armistead. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychology. I'm also the Dean of the Graduate School. And my research is at the intersection of various stressors and family functioning. So, most recently, as in for the past 20 years or so, I've been looking at the impact of HIV on parenting and child functioning. I've worked to build interventions that seek to prevent HIV among youth by helping parents better parent their children, particularly when it comes to healthy sexual development. And I've also been involved in randomized controlled trials involving interventions for families affected by HIV. So most recently, an NIH-funded project aimed at helping mothers who are HIV positive disclose their HIV status to their children.
Oh my goodness, how interesting. So,
Thanks.
one of the questions that we generally have is a little bit about your history. So, why did you choose to go to graduate school? What made you want to go on to get a PhD in psychology?
So I'm one of those weirdos who knew what I wanted to do when I was 12. When I was 12, I decided I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to work in
Mm.
particular with children and families. I made that decision after reading two books, which you wouldn't have expected might lead me to a career in psychology. So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which certainly doesn't represent mental health
Oh
treatment in
my.
any kind of positive way, and Sybil, which has largely been debunked at this point. So those two
Mm-hmm.
books fascinated me and pointed me in the direction of being a child and family psychologist, which didn't have, for me, didn't at all a path to academia, but the way that I envisioned my future to look at age 12 and actually probably all the way through my fourth year of graduate, and I would work directly with families and children. It was during my internship year that I discovered that I enjoyed clinical work, but didn't want to only do one thing for a career, and so pursued a
Mm.
path to academia instead.
Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Yes, it's funny how the paths can change along the way,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah. In fact, that's one of the things that I tell prospective graduate students coming into my lab, as well as those that enter my lab, is because I was just so convinced that I was going to be a clinician when I entered graduate school. I knew that I'd have to do research, but I didn't necessarily imagine doing a lot of it during graduate school, and began working with a very active research mentor whose goal was for his students to graduate with their PhD equipped and with the CV that would allow them to pursue whatever option they chose.
Hmm.
And that was very fortunate for me when I chose not to pursue a clinical career. And I've worked to do the same with my students to ensure that
Hmm.
by the time they're done, even if they think they want one path at the beginning, they have a choice of paths at the end because you don't ever know what you're going to want to do by the time it's all said and done.
Flexibility is key.
Mhm.
Things change very quickly, don't they?
Absolutely.
What do you wish someone had told you? Is there ever something where you're sort of like, oh, if I'd just known that going to grad school would have made my life easier, or I would have been better prepared?
Yeah, I think the thing I was most shocked by, and I still very clearly remember the conversation with my first clinical supervisor in probably the first month of graduate school, was just how much more work graduate school was than undergraduate school. So I remember saying to him, maybe it was more than a month in, but not much more, like there's no time for nap, and I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep, and I feel like I'm never getting all my work done. And the same is true now.
No time for naps.
No time for naps. When you were an undergraduate, you could get up early,
You
go to
can
class, come
just
back, sleep
take a
for a few
nap. Yeah,
hours.
right, exactly. Make it up in
Yeah,
the evening. Yeah, things
right,
change
right.
as responsibilities grow.
Exactly. Yeah. So I try to tell again every prospective graduate student coming in to work with me that um, you have to be prepared for a very different pace
Mm.
of school and education and training in the graduate sphere versus the undergraduate sphere. It's
Do you
quite
think
different.
that was particularly exacerbated by going through the clinical program?
I imagine in some respects because not only are you developing a research program, but you're also having to get a lot of applied.
Yeah.
And in my program, we started seeing clients within the first month of being in graduate school. And,
Wow.
that's pretty intense, right? It was a
That's
very,
very demanding.
yeah, it was very supervised. So every session was observed via one-way mirrors,
Mm.
faculty or your post-intern supervisor. But yeah, I think having to master much more complicated coursework and develop a research program and get the clinical training you need. It's just a lot to undertake. So I'm sure that was
Yeah.
part of it. I worked all through undergraduate, so it wasn't as if I wasn't busy.
Mm.
I just wasn't nearly as busy as I was as a graduate student.
Yeah, it's a whole different level. It does really accelerate quite
Absolutely.
a bit.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Yep.
what was your biggest challenge then in graduate school? If you had to pick something.
Yeah. Um, Probably the statistical methods, and I say that only because
Interesting.
the other thing I vividly remember. As an undergraduate, I made A's in all my psychology classes, and I didn't really have to work particularly hard at that. It was, I was fascinated by it. So I was interested in studying the material and interested in learning it. And when I took my first stats class as a graduate student, my son's trying to get in the camera here. As a, it is, in fact, yeah, pause, Jess. One
Oh,
sec.
okay. Hang on, hang on. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Hang on. Okay, here we go.
A
And we're
little
back.
interruption.
Slight interruption there.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, that's marvelous. Okay, so the question was what I think we were
Oh,
we were
surprise. We
on.
were talking about statistics,
Yeah,
right?
what
Yeah,
was your biggest challenge?
yeah. So that was my biggest challenge. And I say that because in my first year of graduate school, I got a B in my
Ooh.
first statistics class. And, graduate students aren't really supposed to make Bs. So I
Oh yeah.
remember calling my parents and crying and saying I was never going
That's
to
it.
be able to succeed in
Uh,
graduate school.
that's it.
And
I'll never
and
get a scholarship. I'll never move on. Never get a letter
That's
of
right.
recommendation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might as well just, yeah. So by my dissertation year, I was determined to not sort of let statistics stand in my way. And I
Mm,
actually learned how to use this program that doesn't any longer exist. It's been replaced by M Plus to do structural equation modeling for my
mhm.
dissertation. So I
Ooh.
faced my fear
It's
and
really
bit
grabbing
off
the
something
bull
pretty
by the horns to
I'll
go straight
say.
to structural equation modeling.
Well, that long ago, especially because it was just kind of brand
Yeah.
new and conceptually very easy to understand, but
Yeah.
in terms of the programming, it was quite complex. So I was lucky to have a
How'd
uh,
that make you feel when you were done with that?
great. It was
Yeah.
really affirming. It was sort of like, so the thing that scared you the most when you first started was the thing that you were able to master by the end. And so I did. I felt really good about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful experience. And I think that's a
Yeah.
wonderful word of advice too, is
That's
the things
right.
that you're most scared of may be the thing that you actually are doing the best in by the end of it.
Yeah, as long as you face your fears, right? Approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So was there someone or some group of people or some experience that really kept you going? In grad school there can be times when you again like getting a B or finishing, facing your dissertation or something where you're just like, I cannot keep going. Was there something that you found useful for keeping you going?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, I had an extraordinary mentor who is still a dear friend.
Mm.
I'm good friends with him and his wife, and he clearly cared about not only my professional development but my personal development. Behaviorist, so he knew just how to reinforce the behavior and to see you continue, and how not to reinforce those that he didn't want you to
That's
continue.
cheating. That's cheating.
Yeah. Hey, it worked great, right? So Rex, my mentor, was just an absolutely amazing man, and probably the reason I'm in academia now. And then I had some very close friends in my cohort and in the cohort 2 years up. In fact, two of these women are still very good friends of mine. One is in Atlanta and was in my cohort, and we started a book club when I was pregnant with Quinn.
Oh
So
my
23
goodness.
years ago, we're still connected. And then another woman was a couple of years ahead of me and has gone on and is now the provost at Loyola University in Maryland.
Hmm.
And she, because she was just ahead of me in school and beyond, she's been a great mentor and resource. So relationships, which for me is always the
Yeah.
way to get through tough times.
That's something I've heard from a number of people is it's not just, occasionally it's like one person, one conversation or one piece of information, but for a lot of them, it's just like, okay, we were able to work with older students, able to work with a broader range of people. Can you give us a, for instance, is there something specific?
Um, you know, I, I, I'm not sure that it's a single
Mm,
thing, except for, and maybe this is, well, I'm not going to say it's unique to me because we all know that social support's really important to
mm,
health and to mental health. But I encourage my graduate students and recognize in myself the importance of social support and, spending time with others, relying on others, checking out your worst fears with others because they'll often tell you, oh my
mm.
goodness, you shouldn't be afraid of that. You're in fact afraid of
Yeah.
that, or you can handle it this way, or um, and that's honestly been one thing that's been challenging about these times where social support is limited to this kind of interaction, right? So I think if I were to have to name one thing that helped me get through graduate school and that helps me today and every other day, it's being able to connect with friends. It's being able to
Mhm.
talk through the things you're afraid of and get support and encouragement. And that's one thing I love about our graduate program and the program I came from. It's about the people are it's collaborative. It's designed to
Mhm.
enhance collegiality and to enhance collaboration, not to foment
Yeah.
competition. And I think
Yeah.
that makes all the difference in most people's mental health.
Oh, I have to imagine that that's definitely something you'd want to look out for is
Yeah, that's
a
right.
sense of can we work together or are we really sort of pitted against each other? That can't
Yeah,
be, that
yeah,
wouldn't be good for things. Now,
exactly.
did you find that the families and friends that you'd had in college were supportive and able to be communicative with you about graduate school?
Not so much, not so much. So,
Yeah.
my parents both went to college, but neither finished college. They couldn't really imagine why I'd want to go on to 5 more years of college. And my father, who they were generally supportive and quite proud that I was doing those things. They didn't not only did they not really understand why you'd pursue an advanced degree as
Mm,
opposed to going out in the world and making money in business, for example, but they didn't really understand the value of mental health treatment. They came from
mm,
that era of just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. If you're feeling
uh,
sad, just go out and do something and you'll feel better. So they had a very limited understanding of my field, but were always willing to listen and
interesting.
always offered
Yeah.
encouragement.
Yeah.
I of my college peers, I think I may have been the only one who went on to, most everybody went to college, but I can't remember that anybody went on to graduate school. Um,
Interesting.
I'm still friends with a few of those folks and still close and connected, despite, kind of different pathways. But yeah, I was, in terms of getting into graduate school, I really had to rely on my undergraduate faculty.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
a developmental psychologist that was a great mentor and coached me through that process in terms of getting the research experience you need to be
Hmm.
competitive, making sure you're well prepared for the GRE and that sort of thing. I really relied on people in my undergraduate institution.
Starting early, I would imagine. Well, especially
Yeah,
since you knew this is what you wanted to
right.
do. Yeah, you weren't
Yeah.
somebody who woke up your senior year and said, "Gosh, this is what I want to do."
I was
It's
very lucky. I knew I had to get
yeah.
research experience. I was able to get into research labs. I wasn't doing research that I was at all interested in,
Hmm.
but I was able to get the experience that I needed to be competitive for PhD
Oh,
programs.
that's great advice. That is great advice. Well, one thing we are trying to sort of collect information from all the faculty. Of most of us, I think almost all of us had an experience when we went into grad school that it seemed like there was some concept that everybody else could wrap their head around, and
Mm,
we just didn't land. And it was sort of going. You sort of had to pretend for much of the first year or something that you understood what everybody was talking about. Did
mm.
you have that experience? Would you be able to share what that was?
Gosh,
Something
I
that you
don't
just
know that I
really had
had.
trouble wrapping your head around.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as evidenced by the B in statistics.
Right.
that was that was more challenging for me than it was for some of my peers. Um, a thing I remember feeling in my first couple years of graduate school is I would be sitting in research team meetings where my mentor and the senior students would be reeling off the names of other parenting and family
Yeah.
researchers and and the theories they were tied to and the work
Mhm.
that they had done, and it was as if they had this whole language of research that I hadn't yet learned. And I thought to myself, gosh, how am I ever going to put, James
Right.
Patterson together with Oregon and,
Right.
all of
How
these
am I ever going to
connections?
remember all of this?
Right, exactly. So I remember thinking, oh, wow, they know so much and I know so little. How am I ever going to get
Right.
there? I very much remember
Yeah.
that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually you just stick with it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Just stick with
exactly.
it. Stick with it. Eventually
Pers-
you grow into it.
persistence pays off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so one more as we're wrapping up. These are really geared towards potential students who are thinking about going on to a graduate program. Many of them are coming from backgrounds where they don't necessarily have family support,
Mhm.
much like you, much like me, where you're the first in the family to go on
Yes.
to get a PhD, certainly. What advice would you recommend?
I would recommend asking for help, asking
Mm,
questions, knowing as early as you can what steps need to be taken, not being afraid to get feedback on, both the big picture items, like what do you look for in a mentor, what are the good programs, as well as the pieces of your application, like your personal statement, how to make a CV. I think the only way for people to succeed in this space, both in graduate school and getting to graduate school, is by asking others to help them along the
mm,
way. And that's that are able to provide that background. For example, my son,
yeah,
um, had a mom who knew how to help write a personal statement, right, for graduate school, and yet he also asked his IO supervising psychologist to provide him with some
yeah.
feedback on that statement, and her feedback was quite different than mine. And so I think you, you've you've gotta reach out and get help from others if you want to get into school, and certainly if you want to succeed once you're there.
Marvelous. How wonderful advice. Well, thank you very much for your time. I will go ahead and stop the
Absolutely.
recording now.